When the virus struck, it all happened oh so quickly. Almost overnight, the planet of Deltrian's biggest cities were hit by a strange occurrence. People began to just collapse dead in the streets, but they didn't stay dead for long. These walking corpses began to spread their infection through bites as they ripped their way through the local populace. Some lucky few managed to barricade themselves inside of their homes, but they would not be able to hide forever. This is the story of those who refused to accept their deaths and attempted to rebel against fate in a desperate attempt to live. Deep in the city of Tyranol, one of Deltrian's smaller cities, three survivors hide out. They did not know each other mere hours before, but in an attempt to escape the desperate carnage on the streets, they ended up by coincidence taking refuge in the same building. In the street outside, they could hear the fighting still going on. Of the three, Sarai was the oldest at 41 years old. She had spent most of her life on board spaceships, working as a technician on trade ships travelling between Rimworlds. For the last 2 years, she had served as chief technician of the medium-sized trade hauler, the Newborn Star. Sarai had only intended to stay at Tyranol for a single night, as she had gone to the city's engineer guild to try and find recruits for the aging ship. However, when everything went wrong, the captain of the ship had taken the Newborn Star and left dry dock, fleeing into the stars, as had every other crewed space-capable ship across the planet. Paul had spent multiple years of his childhood comatose after falling out of a shuttle at the age of 8. In his later life, he became a policeman and was the best shot in his squad, with him serving as part of the initial police effort to maintain martial law. He had been there when the station was overrun and witnessed the deaths of many of his colleagues and friends. Gronus, or as he preferred to be called Gron, was a simple man. He had never known his parents, instead spending his formative years as a child worker in one of the capital city's many industrial factories. At the age of 21, he changed career and became a mailman. It was in the middle of one of his many deliveries that he came across his first infected. On the fourth night of the zombie infection spreading, the three began to make their final preparations to leave their temporary hideout. Despite trying their best to conserve it, they had finally run out of what very little food they had managed to scavenge from the building. After much debate, it was decided that the safest option would be to try and sneak out of Tyranol and take their chances in the countryside surrounding the city. It would be dangerous, but at least they weren't going unequipped. Paul still had his service revolver, while Gron held onto a rifle he had picked up off the corpse of a militiaman. In comparison, Sarai only had a small industrial knife, which, while not being the best suited to fighting zombies, was at least better than just her fists. When Paul had first fled from the police station, he had brought with him a duffel bag full of ammunition and his police radio, meaning that what they lacked in food, they more than made up for in ammunition.
It's almost time then.
We got this. I mean, we have to, right? Yeah, just as long as we keep running, we'll be fine, surely. Surely. As soon as it hit midnight, the three of them dashed outside their building. They're everywhere! They're everywhere! In a desperate panic, Paul and Grom let off several shots, attempting to take out the closest zombies before fleeing south of Sarai. The city was like a maze of dead ends brought about by the wreckage. After breaking down a wooden wall with their weapons, they began to run through the city's back streets. Off in the distance, they could hear gunfire. It would seem they weren't the only survivors making a mad run to escape. While Sarai, Paul and Gron would just barely manage to escape the city, others would not be so lucky. Our three survivors would spend about half a day hiking through the wilderness until they eventually felt that they were far enough away from the city. At Sarai's suggestion, they decided they would build a small base of operations on these plains. After all, if the state of Tyranol was anything to go by, no city or spaceport would be safe. Yes, indeed, their best option would be to hunker down, make a sustainable food source, build some sort of security, and wait for aid to come from another planet. So they mined out a small cave in a hill where they could place some beds and hide away from roaming zombies while they built a true outer wall. The work was split up evenly between them, with Sanai and Gron mining out their little home, while Paul chopped wood and gathered berries. It was during this time that a lone trader called Dobe approached them. He had been passing through the area when he noticed the group. Unfortunately, they had nothing to trade with, but they were just glad to see another living survivor. In the end, Dobe didn't stay long, with him telling them he was from a group of survivors called the O'Hara League. Unfortunately, they didn't have room for more survivors, but told them if he or anyone else from the League passed through the area again, they'd stop by to trade. However, he did leave them with a single parting gift, a sack of rice seeds. Just, call it an investment in a future trade partner. So, they started planting the seeds in a small fenced off area. So, I've been thinking, that guy's group has a name. We need a name. No, we don't need a name, mate. That would just be weird.
I hate to admit it, but if we're going to be trading, we're going to need a name.
After much debate, they finally settled on the name of Lendo, a totally random name that later not one of them could remember where it came from. Every now and again, the odd zombie would walk into the base during the day. These were dealt with pretty easily by the group, but at night, oh, at night things got difficult. Each day when darkness descended, the number of zombies just seemed to increase exponentially. Before they were able to hide in their cave, but now they couldn't risk the zombies breaking through the fence and trampling all their precious crops. So each night turned into a chaotic battle, with Gron and Paul picking off as many zombies as they could, while Sarai finished any stragglers that got too close to them. Horrifyingly, even children were among the zombies that attacked. During one of these desperate battles was when they encountered their first mutant zombie. It was larger than most of the other zombies and moved very slowly, dragging along a trail of black tar wherever it went. Every time it was hit, its wounds would ooze out gas, making the mutant even harder to shoot. While they would eventually finish it off, it did raise a worrying question. Was it a one-off? Or are there other mutant zombies? And if so, just how powerful are they? Unfortunately for Lendo, zombies were not their only problem. A raider drawn by the gunfire had arrived, but waited until the combat was thickest to make her move against the small group. Battling her way through the zombies, she came charging towards the group, before Grom noticed her and put a bullet in her leg, and Paul managed to land a solid shot to her shoulder, sending the overconfident raider tumbling to the ground. It didn't take very long for a zombie to get to her. Once all the zombies had been fought off, Gron, Paul and Sarai stood around the raider. She begged them to kill her, to not let her turn into one of those things. In an attempt to convince them, she revealed she was from a group called Calibri, who after running out of food had resorted to raiding other groups to survive. They weren't alone either. All around were other groups battling it out over whatever resources they could find. In this region alone, there were 3 different raider camps. 2 of these settlements, Blight Town and Decay Tank, were under the control of the Toxoid Company, while the third, Yettenbersh, belonged to the Hills tribe of Durbunt.
She's a useless raider, just leave her to turn.
No, no one deserves that.